So last week on Friday, we completed probably the briefest look at a Springboard activity ever. We looked at activity 116, and on Friday, we just really reviewed what was the negation strategy in 116, and then you wrote your second body paragraph, which was based on the negation of a hero. So in your bookmark, where activity 116 is listed, go ahead and write down how activity 116 prepared you to write your definition essay of what defines a hero. Take a moment to go ahead and do that. And once you've answered your response, you can take that blue bookmark, flip it to the back side, so that we can catalog how activity 116 prepped you for those concepts that your essay is going to be graded on. If you can see the class bookmark where you're seated at, you can go ahead and just make your markings. For those of you that aren't able to see from where you're seated, activity 116 has you practice 4 out of the 9 concepts that your definition essay will be graded on. So you can just tune in and write the markings as I tell them. Activity 116 has you practice the first concept, strategies of definition, specifically negation. It has you practice the third concept of developing supporting details and evidence. It has you practice the fifth concept of developing supporting paragraphs to prove your point. And it had you work with concept 6, where you developed topic sentence, you worked with transitions in your own body paragraph. So those are the 4 concepts that 116 had you practice. Once you've got that down, you can go ahead and put that blue bookmark away. You're going to open up your Springboard to page 80. You're definitely going to want a highlighter. If you have multiple highlighter colors, I would suggest that you take out multiple today, because you'll see I'll make a lot of different colored markings today in our activity. Our new activity, you folks know to break up those learning targets, diffuse them. So let's see what 117 is going to have you practice. There's 2 major practice points in 117. The first, you're going to identify and evaluate the organization or the structure of this definition essay. And secondly, you'll be drafting your thesis and outline for your definition essay. This is the final activity before you turn in your definition essay. So we're going to break this activity up over the course of a few days just to make sure that you don't feel overwhelmed having to attack the essay at one sitting. All right? Now, the big step 1 that is asking you to review the scoring guide, you've already done that with your bookmark. So do me a favor and just exit that out. Just put an X through it. If you want to make it as big and bold, that's totally up to you. It always feels good when we can skip some steps because we've already done it, because we're that awesome. And today's focus is primarily on the structure of your introduction. So we're going to be focusing solely on the intro today. We're going to be taking notes on the intro, and then you're going to make your intro. So the screen that you have right now, it's the bottom of page 80, but also the top of page 81. I just put it on one big screenshot here. That way it made it easier for you to look at. So the first thing I'm going to have you do at the bottom of page 80, where that introduction subheading is at, I want you to go ahead and write that note. This is essentially the how-to of your intro. And your introduction includes three key components: the hook, the bridge, and the thesis statement. Now, each one of those three components should be familiar to you, especially if you did Springboard in 7th grade. If not, don't worry, it's pretty common sense. Once we work through it, you'll be okay. All right, so once you do have that note listed about the intro, I'm going to go ahead and have you highlight the introduction subheading as well. And right below the introduction subheading, I'm just going to have you re-highlight that an intro has three main parts. Okay, now the first part of the introduction is called the hook. All right, and the purpose of the hook is the following: grab the reader's attention. Okay, now your reader is going to be peers. It's also going to be me. And I'm going to be reading over 140 essays. So I need to have variety to be engaged. And when I get 80 kids writing the same opening, it gets really, really dull. So I'm hoping that you folks are able to come up with the challenge of having a really solid, interesting, and original hook. All right, now there's four ways that you can write the hook. Okay, the first way that you can write the hook is something called an anecdote. So go ahead and just make yourself that little mark. An anecdote is a very, very fancy term for a story from real life which relates to your essay. Okay, what's the major prompt of our essay? What exactly are we writing about again? Yeah.
The definition of a hero.
Okay, the definition of a hero, great. Now, what would be some examples that you have of real-life heroes that we've discussed in class? What's an example of one, Dupree?
The one with Andy and the pit bull.
Okay, we've got the one of Andy Davis saving the pit bull. What's another one, Joshua? Abraham Lincoln, when we were reading in Springboard. Another one, Megan?
The firefighter shooting the sheep.
The firefighter saving the sheep. So you folks could technically open up your essay by revisiting one of those stories, whether it was something in Springboard or one of the video clips. All right, now, the second way that you could write a hook to pull in the reader is a question. Okay, not the lame, ruthless question, what defines a hero? No, you can do way better than that. That's not thought-provoking. That's just me going, oh, this is the 90th time I've read that. Boring. Think bigger. Okay, now the type of question, it is thought-provoking, and a lot of people consider it rhetorical, meaning that there is no right or wrong answer. It can be answered in multiple fashions. These are the most common ways that your age group likes to write a hook, but there's two other ways, and these are at the top of page 81. The third way is with an interesting quote. Now, you folks have quotes in your Springboard. You could probably paraphrase a quote from somebody that we watched in a film, and today you're actually going to have a list of quotes provided for you, too, so you'll get some more options there. The third way, something called the intriguing statement. And the intriguing statement is taking common knowledge and turning it on its head. And you'll get a more clear view of what that means in a little bit. All right, so that's just the first part of the intro. It's called the hook. All right, now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the second component. All right, now this is on page 81. It's probably a quarter of the way down. The second component is called the bridge. And the bridge is another weird term, but this is something that your age group can struggle with occasionally. You get better with it the more that you practice. Now, the idea behind the bridge is twofold, meaning that there's two ideas about it. The bridge, it makes a clear connection between two parts. Okay, now take a look at the screen for a second. The terminology that pops up right after the highlighted phrase, connection between, I don't like that. It's not concise enough. So instead, I want you to scratch that off and replace it with this. Again, scratch off these two parts, and instead, I want you to write down hook and thesis. So the bridge is the glue for me to understand why you provided me the hook that you did and how is it relevant to your thesis statement. Now, the second purpose behind the bridge It provides background information. And keep in mind, once you leave middle school, once you leave high school, whether you're entering the workforce or you're going off to college because you want a higher degree, a teacher is not always going to be a reader. Your reader is going to be a bigger audience. So you have to acknowledge that your reader doesn't know anything about this concept. So the purpose behind the bridge is to help the individual who's reading understand where you're coming from. So you've got to give them every single point that you're providing from your brain to the page. Okay? Now, we've already talked about 2 steps of the introduction, but we're going to actually get started developing one of those components. All right, so on the screen, you folks have this index card looking piece. I'm going to provide you with a very, very large index card. Things pretty nice. Okay. Now, which side does it say that you folks are going to be starting with according to that PowerPoint? Blank side means no lines. Okay, now you notice the setup has 6 different boxes and it's got these headings. You're going to develop that on the index card that you're provided. If you want to use a ruler, you can, but I don't want you wasting a lot of time to get this index card like perfect lines. I'm only going to give you about 2 minutes to get your index card set up so that we can start working with it. So if you've got a ruler that you're wanting to use, go ahead, pull it out, no big deal. But I'm only giving you a few minutes to get it ready here. Extra index cards, you can just leave them at the front of the table. If you need more, just keep your hand up and I'll bring it to you. Right now, I know there's a few of you that are still just putting some finishing touches on your index card, and the index card, it's not going to change on the screen. It's going to look the same. There's just going to be a little bit more information added. So what I'm going to have you folks do to start here is you're going to focus in on those central 4 boxes that have listed the 4 possible hook options: anecdote, question, quote, intriguing statement. Now, what I'm going to have you folks do is you're going to take about 4.5 minutes, maybe 5, and I want you to try your best to develop an example of each type of hook. So if you take a look at the screen, I've got written in red, and I'll go ahead, or not red, orange. I'll change that color because it looks kind of tricky. But those orange hints are to help guide you in developing possible examples of each of the 4 types of hooks. All right. Now, at your desk, you're going to find either 1 to 2 laminated sheets that have a list of quotes from historical figures and writers. Now, the quotes that are listed on that page, those would be quotes that you would choose for the quote option. Okay? Now, you don't have to choose from that list. If you want to go back to your springboard or you want to paraphrase a statement from the video that we saw, by all means, go for it. But at this point, take about 4.5 minutes. I want you to try to develop an example of each type of hook choice. Go ahead. Now, if you're looking at your index card and you don't have 4 examples of hooks, that's 100% okay. That probably just means that you're super, super strong with 1 to 2, maybe 3 of these types, and another hook, it's just a little bit more difficult for you. That's totally fine. All right, now, the next thing that we're going to do, I'm going to ask you to go ahead, take your index card, and pass it to the person towards your left. So we're just going to make one big circle around your table. And once you pass that card to the left, I'm going to ask you to read this peer's hook examples. And after you've read all of them, or you see one and you go, oh my gosh, this is awesome, I want you to put a star next to the hook that you think is the best one. Even if there's only one and that's the one by default, that's totally fine. But put a star next to the one that you like the best. Give you a minute and a half to kind of read through those, and then make sure that the card gets returned to the owner. once you've got your card back, you might agree with that person, you might disagree. That's up to you. You're the author. You're going to be able to pick and choose your own adventure on this one. But what we're going to go ahead and do now is we need to talk about the third component of your introduction, and that's the thesis statement. So I want you to go back to your Springboard text. I want you to go to page 81. And the thesis is almost dead smack in the center there. And I'll go ahead and turn the light off for you too. Now, the purpose of the thesis was your in question. So if you were kind of getting tripped up as to what might be considered a solid answer, the stuff that we highlight here can help you generate a really concentrated and concise response for that. So first thing I want you to highlight is the following. The thesis is essentially your response to a prompt. It's your answer. So our embedded assessment, it has somewhat of a prompt, but it also is a bit of a question. So thinking in your mind what we're supposed to write about, how would you turn our prompt into a question? What kind of question could we ask? That's mainly the prompt itself. What do you think, Taylor?
How do you define a hero?
Nice. How do you define a hero? So, Alyssa, how would you, or not Alyssa, Elise, how would you define a hero? Okay, so Elise's response, she said creative. Did I hear right? Courageous. So she said courageous. Guess what? That's part of the thesis statement. Elena, how would you define a hero? Hero is brave. There's part of the thesis statement. All right, now the next thing I want you to go ahead and highlight within this info, it is the most important part of your essay. This is the focus. If you don't have a thesis statement, you don't have an essay. All you've got is a bunch of jargon and thoughts smushed onto paper here. Last but not least, something about the thesis to always consider, you should never, ever, ever include any kind of pronoun in first person. There's nothing more lame than an author saying, I think, I believe, I know. Yes, I know you know. You wrote the paper. You don't have to tell me you know or you think. You're the author. You wrote this thing. This is obviously what you think or you know. Okay? Last but not least, what I really want you to shoot for this year, I really want you to write your thesis statement as a complex sentence. So this is the final thing I'm having you highlight. We could write a very simplistic thesis statement, but really push yourself to make it even better this year. All right, now there's a little note in that teal box. It says that your thesis needs to contain a general statement and 3 big reasons. So what I want you to do now is go ahead and turn to page 82. So we're going to skip over some material for a second. About halfway down page 82, you should see this revising thesis statement subheading. Do me a favor, write that note, example thesis statement, and we're just going to be looking at one example thesis statement that's relevant to your essay. So we're just going to look at one. So in this subheading, there's a secondary bullet point that says revised model. I would say box that in. Whether you want to use your highlighter or not, doesn't matter, but I'm going to have you box that in so it stands out. And I'm going to have you break this model apart by its general statement and its 3 terms. All right? So you're going to see on my screen there's going to be 2 different colors. You might want to do the same, or maybe you use a highlighter and you use your pen to underline or circle some stuff. So the first thing I'm going to have you do is highlight heroism. This is the general statement of this thesis statement. And then the 3 supporting ideas behind heroism: selflessness, dedication, and helping others. Now we could write this thesis statement in a very general term. Heroism involves selflessness, dedication, and helping others. That's a thesis statement. But this revised version It's a lot more complex than that. So, Jane, could you read for us the revised model thesis statement?
Research learning involves required dedication to the challenge overhead justified recognition.
Awesome. So that's an example of a complex sentence. That piece contains the general statement, three supporting ideas. Last thing I want you to do, it just popped up on the screen. You don't have to copy that entire piece, but I want you to make a note of what exactly was the general statement that you highlighted and what were the three reasons. So if you want to make yourself a quick little key, you can do that, but I just want you to be able to recognize this a few days from now and say, oh, that's why I had written this down. Now, we've kind of glazed over the second component of the intro. You developed the hook. We talked about the bridge. Now we're moving on to the thesis statement. Now, the only way that you can truly make a bridge, you have to have your thesis statement done before that. So what's going to pop up now, it's going to bring you back to your index card. And in your index card, next thing I want you to do is focus where you wrote down that thesis statement subheading. Now what I'm going to ask you to do is go ahead and develop a working thesis statement. Okay, it doesn't have to be a complex sentence at this point, but you want to make sure that you give me the general big idea, what a hero is, or the concept of heroism, and I want you to write down what are the three reasons that you're going to use to prove a hero. One last consideration, make sure that one of your reasons is function-based, one is negation-based, and one is example-based. All right, so take no more than 2 minutes. So go ahead and write down your draft of your thesis statement. And it's okay if your thesis statement seems kind of boring right now. There's nothing wrong with that. You're still just drafting this idea. I am going to bring your attention next to 2 examples of completed introductions. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them, but I do want you to see them. I do want you to know that they are there as a reference point in case you need them. So I'm going to bring your attention back to your springboard, and I'm going to have you looking at page 81. So you're going to have to rewind here. Now on page 81, it's the bottom half of the page that you see this evaluating and revising introduction. Now, I'm not going to have you folks revise these introductions at all. You don't have to make the highlighting marks on the screen unless you are compelled to do so. But I just wanted you to get kind of a bird's eye view regarding the setup of the introduction. So my hook is indicated in yellow, my bridge had no actual marking, and my thesis was indicated in blue. So every introduction goes in that order. We have a hook, we have a bridge, and we have a thesis. So if you want to make the marks, you can. You don't have to. But this is just a really quick viewing of how everything gets set up. Now, I can tell you real quickly with both examples, each introduction starts with a quote as a hook. Each bridge explains what the hook is about. So each quote, it's explained more in detail, and it's tied into the relevancy of a hero. And that gets us led up to the thesis statement itself of, okay, the reason why this author gave me this hook was because it explains the qualities of a hero, and oh, here she goes, now she's explaining what a hero is made of. So if you're wanting to refer back to these, you can. I'm not going to have you read them. We're not going to analyze them. There's no point to that today. But they are there if you want them. So now the next step for you folks is to go back to your index card and flip it to the line side. Now the line side of your index card is reserved for your introduction. So this is where you take the hook that you made on the opposite side. You dive into what the purpose of your hook was as your bridge. So you answer a question that you posed or you explain a quote. And then you copy your thesis statement. I don't foresee this taking more than, say, 5 minutes, but I'll give you that time frame in case you need it. And my hope is that within 5 minutes, you'll be able to swap your index card with a partner so you can get some ideas from other folks of how they're writing an intro. All right, so go ahead and take about 5 minutes. Let me know if you need any help with setting up your intro. Let's see if we can't get this done in 5.